Every single day, your brain negotiates with your body. It says, do we push forward or do we give in? Willpower is that moment when the brain chooses action over comfort, discipline over impulse. But here's the truth. We're not born with willpower, we build it. Like muscle, it grows when stressed, strategically, consistently, and scientifically. Today, I'm going to show you how neuroscience, real data from labs and real-world application can teach us to build willpower like we train strength. And if you stay with me, you'll walk away with tools you can start using today to become more disciplined, more focused, and more unstoppable. Willpower often feels like a mysterious force, something we either have or don't have on a given day. But when we look at it through the lens of neuroscience, we discover something empowering. Willpower is not just a feeling or a character trait, it's a neurobiological process, deeply rooted in the architecture and chemistry of the human brain. The seat of willpower lies in the prefrontal cortex, the most evolved part of the brain, situated right behind your forehead. This region is responsible for what's called executive function. That includes things like planning, decision-making, impulse control, and regulating emotions. When you resist hitting snooze, when you choose a healthy meal over junk food, or when you sit down to work instead of checking your phone, you're engaging the prefrontal cortex. But the prefrontal cortex doesn't act alone. It works in concert with other regions like the anterior cingulate cortex, which plays a key role in error detection and evaluating competing goals, and the basal ganglia, which helps form and automate habits over time. Another crucial element in this equation is the neurotransmitter dopamine. Most people associate dopamine with pleasure, but in the context of willpower, dopamine functions more like a chemical of anticipation and motivation. When your brain anticipates a reward, whether it's the satisfaction of completing a task or the thrill of scrolling through social media, dopamine is released. The greater the perceived reward, the more dopamine you get. What this means is that your brain is constantly weighing options based on which outcome seems most rewarding in that moment. Willpower, then, is the act of overriding the immediate dopamine hit in favor of a larger delayed reward. And that override is orchestrated by a well-functioning prefrontal cortex. Here's where it gets really interesting. Stress, fatigue, and lack of sleep all impair the prefrontal cortex. Under those conditions, activity shifts away from the prefrontal areas and toward more primitive brain regions like the amygdala, which governs fear, emotion, and automatic reactions. This is why when you're tired or stressed, your ability to resist temptation or make disciplined choices plummets. It's not a moral failure, it's a shift in brain chemistry and structure. That's why building willpower isn't about just trying harder, it's about supporting the brain's systems that allow you to regulate behavior in the first place. Recent neuroimaging studies have shown that people who regularly engage in tasks requiring self-control like meditation, cold exposure, or breathwork actually have stronger connectivity in the networks between the prefrontal cortex and subcortical structures. In other words, repeated use strengthens the neural circuits responsible for willpower. Like lifting weights builds muscle, using self-control builds structural and functional strength in your brain's control systems. That's neuroplasticity at work, the brain's ability to change and grow in response to experience. One of the most remarkable findings in this area is that even imagining resisting temptation activates the same regions of the brain as actually doing it. This means mental rehearsal, visualizing yourself sticking to your goals, choosing discipline over distraction, can prime the same neural circuits that get used in real-life moments of decision. Your brain doesn't perfectly distinguish between real and vividly imagined experience. This gives you a powerful training tool, right inside your own head. So willpower, when we strip away the myths, is not about white-knuckling your way through life. It's about understanding the neural systems that govern decision-making and learning how to engage them intelligently. When you understand how your brain creates and manages willpower, you can stop blaming yourself for failing and start designing systems that support you. You gain agency. You realize that building willpower is less about who you are and more about how your brain is wired and how you can rewire it. The idea that willpower behaves like a muscle is not just a metaphor, it's a model grounded in both psychological research and neurobiology. Just like a muscle, willpower can be strengthened with consistent training, and it can also become fatigued when overused. But the key insight is this: if you work with it deliberately, if you challenge it in manageable doses, it grows. And over time, what once seemed impossible becomes automatic, effortless, and even enjoyable. When researchers first began studying willpower, they noticed that people who excelled in self-control, those who stayed on task, resisted temptation, and achieved long-term goals, weren't superhuman. What set them apart was how they trained their minds in small, often invisible ways. They didn't start by trying to overhaul their entire lifestyle or take on massive challenges. Instead, they performed what you might call micro reps of discipline. They would resist the urge to check their phone for just a few extra seconds. They'd finish one more paragraph before taking a break. They'd delay gratification just long enough to stretch their tolerance. Each of these actions is small, almost insignificant in isolation. But like lifting a tiny weight every day, they gradually build neurological endurance. From a neurobiological standpoint, every time you resist a short-term impulse, your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive control, fires up. This neural activity not only strengthens existing connections, but also encourages the growth of new synaptic pathways. This is the principle of neuroplasticity: neurons that fire together, wire together. Each small act of self-control increases your brain's efficiency in engaging those networks the next time. And over time, you're not just being disciplined, you're becoming someone for whom discipline is easier, more natural. But just like muscles can be overtrained, so can willpower. There's something known as ego depletion, a phenomenon where after repeated acts of self-control, people show reduced capacity to regulate their behavior. Imagine you're resisting dessert at lunch, staying patient during meetings, and holding your temper in traffic, all in the same afternoon. By the evening, you're more likely to snap at a loved one or give in to cravings. That doesn't mean you're weak, it means your willpower circuits have been temporarily taxed. This is why strategic recovery, just like in physical training, is crucial. Deep rest, nutrition, and restoring glucose to the brain can replenish your ability to stay focused and disciplined. Another aspect of this willpower as muscle model is progression. Just as no one starts in the gym lifting the heaviest weights, you shouldn't expect yourself to demonstrate elite self-control without building the foundation first. You start with challenges that are just beyond your current comfort zone. For one person, that might be setting a 10-minute block of focused work. For another, it might be resisting the urge to interrupt a conversation. The key is gradual overload, intentionally stretching your capacity just a little bit more than before, consistently. With time, your threshold for discomfort expands, your tolerance for delay strengthens, and crucially, your confidence in your own discipline grows. There's also a hormonal component to this. When you successfully engage in acts of willpower, your body releases a cocktail of neurotransmitters and hormones, dopamine, norepinephrine, and even a bit of adrenaline, that reinforce the behavior. This internal reward system creates a feedback loop. The more you experience the intrinsic reward of pushing through resistance, the more likely you are to do it again. Eventually, that resistance becomes something you seek out. You stop fearing the hard thing and start feeling empowered by it. An important element of building willpower in this way is tracking your progress and celebrating small wins. The brain is designed to seek feedback. When you set a goal, even a small one, and then achieve it, you activate reward centers that promote motivation. This creates a positive cycle: challenge, action, reward. So many people wait to celebrate only the big accomplishments, but the truth is, willpower grows faster when you acknowledge every rep, every time you choose to do the thing you didn't feel like doing. Ultimately, building willpower like a muscle transforms the way you relate to challenge. Instead of avoiding hard things, you start to view them as training opportunities. You stop seeing effort as a sign that you're failing, and start seeing it as evidence that you're getting stronger. Over time, this shift changes not just your behaviors, but your identity. You become someone who consistently follows through, someone who finishes what they start, someone who does what needs to be done, even when it's hard. That's not just self-control, that's freedom. One of the most profound and surprising tools for building willpower doesn't come from mental training, meditation, or motivational speeches. It comes from cold, literally. Deliberate cold exposure, such as taking cold showers, using ice baths, or even brief immersion in cold water, has been shown to significantly enhance our ability to regulate the mind and body under stress. This isn't just a test of toughness or endurance, it's a deeply biological intervention that taps into ancient systems of survival and self-control. When you expose your body to cold, your nervous system reacts immediately, your heart rate spikes, your breathing becomes rapid and shallow. Your skin sends urgent signals to your brain, warning of potential danger. This is the autonomic nervous system in action, specifically the sympathetic branch, often referred to as the fight or flight system. But here's where the power lies. In that uncomfortable moment, you have a choice. You can either let your body's panic dictate your actions, or you can engage your conscious control systems, specifically the prefrontal cortex, and override the impulse to escape. In doing so, you're not just staying in the cold, you're training your brain to stay calm in chaos. You're literally building neural circuits of willpower. Every second that you stay present in that cold, every time you slow your breathing and shift from panic to control, you are practicing the art of self-regulation. You're training your body to tolerate discomfort and your mind to stay focused when the environment demands surrender. This isn't abstract, it's measurable. Studies show that regular cold exposure increases activation and connectivity in areas of the brain responsible for emotional regulation and executive control. What this means is that you're not just becoming more tolerant of cold, you're becoming more resilient in every part of your life. This kind of training has spillover effects into everyday challenges. When you're stuck in traffic and feel anger rising, when you're tempted to procrastinate, or when anxiety creeps in before a big decision, those are the mental equivalents of cold exposure. Your nervous system responds with stress, and you have the opportunity to regulate your response. People who regularly practice cold exposure often report that these moments feel less intense, more manageable. It's as if they've expanded their capacity to hold tension without reacting. That's willpower in action. Physiologically, cold exposure also triggers the release of norepinephrine, a powerful neuromodulator involved in attention, alertness, and mood. Elevated norepinephrine increases your ability to focus and withstand discomfort. It's the brain's natural stimulant, and it sharpens the mind like nothing else. Over time, this heightened responsiveness becomes more accessible. Your baseline levels of alertness increase. You become less reliant on caffeine, external motivation, or high-stimulation environments. You feel more in control of your energy and your actions. Perhaps most importantly, cold exposure teaches you that you can do hard things. It shows you viscerally that you are not a victim of your sensations. You can feel fear, stress, and resistance without acting on them. And that lesson, repeated daily in the cold, becomes a fundamental part of your self-identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who chooses discomfort not because you enjoy suffering, but because you understand its value. Discomfort becomes a signal of growth, not a cue to quit. In a world that's engineered for comfort, warm rooms, instant gratification, constant convenience, deliberate cold exposure is a radical act. It's a return to a more primal way of interacting with the environment. But more than that, it's a tool to train your nervous system, a tool to gain mastery over your impulses, and a tool to build a kind of willpower that isn't dependent on motivation or mood. It becomes part of who you are. Ultimately, when you regularly expose yourself to cold, you're not just getting used to being uncomfortable, you're expanding your mental bandwidth. You're telling your brain, I can do this, I can endure, I can stay. And with each repetition, you reinforce that message until it's no longer a statement, it's a truth you carry into every moment of resistance, every decision point, every hard thing that stands between you and your potential. In moments of stress, temptation, or mental fatigue, most people turn inward. Their thoughts race, emotions surge, and clarity dissolves into chaos. What few realize is that one of the most powerful tools for restoring willpower and regaining control is not some complex psychological strategy, it's vision. The act of controlling where and how you direct your gaze can have an immediate and measurable impact on your nervous system, your emotional state, and your ability to execute self-control. This is not metaphorical, it's biological. The eyes are literally an extension of the brain. The retina, located at the back of your eyes, is composed of neural tissue, and the way you use your eyes directly influences the activity of brain regions involved in focus, motivation, and regulation of stress. When you experience a strong impulse, whether it's the desire to scroll your phone, eat something unhealthy, or abandon a difficult task, your visual field often becomes scattered and unfocused. You might not notice it consciously, but your eyes begin darting around or losing their anchor point. This visual chaos is mirrored internally by a kind of cognitive disarray. Your mind becomes reactive, flooded with conflicting urges and excuses. But here's where the science becomes empowering by consciously narrowing your visual field and fixing your gaze on a single point. Whether it's an object in the room, the edge of your desk, or even a spot on the wall, you begin to activate specific neural circuits in the prefrontal cortex and basal ganglia that are associated with calm, deliberate focus. This practice is known as visual anchoring, and what makes it so powerful is its immediacy. While most self-regulation techniques involve effortful thought or delayed reward, visual anchoring works in real time. It sends a signal to your brain that says, "We are not reacting, we are choosing to stay." This stabilizes the autonomic nervous system, reducing sympathetic arousal, the fight-or-flight response, and enhancing parasympathetic tone, which is associated with calm, measured action. In effect, it creates a physiological state that supports willpower. And unlike many cognitive strategies, it doesn't require verbal reasoning or internal debate. It's somatic, it's direct, and it's under your control at any moment. This process has roots in evolutionary biology. Our ancestors evolved to use vision as a primary survival tool, not just to detect threats, but to signal behavioral state. When an animal locks its gaze on something, its brain interprets this as a moment of importance, of deliberate attention. The same circuits involved in visual focus are connected to the brain's motivational systems. When you narrow your focus, you increase the activity of neurons that facilitate goal-directed behavior. This is especially true in high-stakes situations, where maintaining calm under pressure is critical. Neuroscientific studies using functional MRI have shown that deliberate visual focus increases coherence between the visual cortex, prefrontal cortex, and the locus coeruleus, a brainstem structure involved in the release of norepinephrine. This neurochemical is essential for alertness, arousal, and effort regulation. When released in moderate amounts, norepinephrine sharpens your attention and improves task performance. However, when released in excess, it can cause anxiety and panic. Visual anchoring helps modulate this release by keeping your sensory systems aligned and your internal state regulated. It's also worth noting that gaze patterns influence not only focus, but emotional perception. When your eyes are constantly shifting, your brain interprets the environment as uncertain or threatening. But when your gaze is steady and controlled, your brain receives a signal of safety and agency. This shift reduces cortisol levels and enhances your ability to access rational, future-oriented thinking. You become less reactive and more intentional. And that's the essence of willpower, the ability to choose what matters most over what feels good right now. In practical terms, the implications are profound. The next time you feel your willpower slipping, whether you're about to procrastinate, lash out emotionally, or give up on something challenging, try this pause, find a fixed point in your environment, and lock your gaze. Hold it for 30 seconds. Breathe slowly through your nose. As you do this, you're not just calming your body, you're engaging the circuits of control, reinforcing the habit of staying present in the face of discomfort. Over time, this simple act can become a powerful reset button, giving you a few crucial seconds to choose discipline over impulse. What makes this technique especially valuable is its accessibility. You don't need any tools. You don't need a special environment. You don't even need silence or stillness. Your eyes go with you everywhere. And because they're a direct pathway into your brain's control systems, they offer a powerful, low-effort way to train and maintain willpower throughout your day. It's a kind of stealth tool, always available, always effective, and almost invisible to the outside world. By learning to control your visual focus, you're not just improving concentration, you're rewiring your brain for greater emotional regulation, deeper motivation, and stronger executive function. You're teaching yourself to stay when it's hard, to breathe when it's tense, to act when distraction tempts you to retreat. And each time you make that choice, the circuits grow stronger. That's how small moments of focus lead to massive transformations in your ability to control your behavior, achieve your goals, and live with intention. Sleep is often treated as a luxury in modern life, something we squeeze in after everything else is done, rather than the foundation it truly is. But when it comes to building and sustaining willpower, sleep is not optional, it is essential. The quality and quantity of your sleep directly determine the functioning of your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for self-control, decision-making, and resisting temptation. Without adequate sleep, even the most disciplined individual will find their resolve slipping, their focus fragmenting, and their impulses taking over. During deep sleep, particularly in the slow-wave stages, your brain performs a kind of neurological maintenance. It clears metabolic waste, consolidates memory, and resets the chemical balance needed for optimal function. One of the key systems that gets replenished is the executive network, which governs willpower. This network relies heavily on glucose and oxygen to function efficiently. When you're well rested, these resources are abundant, and the neural circuits that control focus and behavior are well connected and responsive. But when you're sleep deprived, those same circuits show decreased activity and weakened connectivity. The result is that your ability to resist urges, delay gratification, and stay aligned with long-term goals becomes compromised. Numerous studies have shown that sleep deprivation, defined as even one night of less than 6 hours, leads to a significant drop in impulse control. Participants in these studies are more likely to choose immediate rewards over delayed ones, to give in to distractions, and to engage in risky behavior. This isn't because they suddenly want different things or lose sight of their goals. It's because their brain no longer has the resources to hold the line. Willpower, like physical strength, requires energy to function, and sleep is the most powerful and reliable way to recharge that energy. But sleep isn't just about quantity, it's also about timing and quality. Your brain operates on a circadian rhythm, a roughly 24-hour internal clock that dictates when you feel alert and when you feel sleepy. This rhythm is regulated by light exposure, especially early in the morning and late in the evening. When you align your sleep schedule with your natural circadian rhythm, going to bed and waking up at consistent times, you improve sleep efficiency, hormone regulation, and cognitive performance. This includes the release of key hormones like cortisol and melatonin, which influence everything from mood to metabolism to the regulation of stress. And stress, as we know, is a primary enemy of willpower. When you're constantly in a heightened state of physiological stress, your ability to stay calm, focused, and deliberate takes a massive hit. One of the most overlooked aspects of sleep and willpower is what happens just before you fall asleep and immediately after you wake up. These transitional states, the hypnagogic and hypnopompic phases, are moments of increased neuroplasticity and suggestibility. The thoughts you dwell on during these times can reinforce patterns in your brain. If you go to bed ruminating on your failures or wake up immediately checking social media, you're priming your brain to be reactive and externally focused. But if you use these moments to visualize your goals, practice gratitude, or simply take a few minutes to breathe and reflect, you begin to set a tone of intentionality for your entire day. This primes the neural pathways associated with focus, motivation, and self-control. Additionally, high-quality sleep enhances your ability to regulate emotions. When you're sleep deprived, the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system, becomes hyperactive, while the connection between the amygdala and prefrontal cortex weakens. This means you're more likely to overreact, make impulsive decisions, and struggle with frustration or anxiety. In contrast, good sleep restores this balance. It gives you a buffer between stimulus and response, a few extra seconds to think, breathe, and choose your reaction. That space is where willpower lives. There's also a strong connection between sleep and dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with motivation and reward. Sleep deprivation reduces the sensitivity of dopamine receptors in the brain, which means it becomes harder to feel pleasure or motivation from ordinary tasks. This leads to what's called reward-seeking behavior. Your brain starts craving more intense stimulation like junk food, mindless entertainment, or other quick fixes. In this state, it becomes incredibly difficult to stay aligned with long-term goals, not because you lack discipline, but because your brain is chemically skewed toward short-term gratification. The good news is that sleep is highly responsive to behavior. You can dramatically improve your sleep quality by making intentional changes to your environment and routine. Avoiding screens in the hour before bed, dimming artificial lights, keeping your bedroom cool and dark, and avoiding caffeine late in the day all signal to your brain that it's time to wind down. Similarly, getting bright light exposure early in the morning, ideally from sunlight, helps anchor your circadian rhythm and improve sleep onset and depth later that night. These small habits, when practiced consistently, can transform your brain's ability to rest, recover, and perform. Ultimately, building willpower isn't just about pushing harder during the day, it's about recovering more effectively at night. Sleep is the reset button for your nervous system, the refueling station for your mental energy, and the quiet architect of your long-term success. When you protect your sleep, you protect your ability to make wise choices, to resist temptation, and to show up as the person you want to be, not once in a while, but consistently. That is the true power of sleep in the pursuit of willpower. One of the most underrated but deeply transformative tools for cultivating willpower is the breath. Breath is unique in that it is both automatic and voluntary. It happens without our conscious effort, yet we can also take control of it at any moment. This dual nature gives it incredible power. It acts as a bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind, between the body's automatic stress responses and our deliberate, goal-driven behavior. The way you breathe affects your brain, your heart, your muscles, your hormones, and even the way you think and feel. And most importantly, it influences your ability to regulate your impulses, make difficult choices, and persist in the face of discomfort. In other words, it shapes your willpower. When we encounter stress, temptation, or any kind of resistance, our breathing often becomes shallow and rapid. This is the body's default response, a leftover from our evolutionary past, where threats required immediate physical action. This kind of breathing is part of the sympathetic nervous system's activation, also known as the fight or flight response. It's useful in emergencies, but in daily life it often does more harm than good. It shortens our attention span, clouds our judgment, and makes us more reactive. We find ourselves scrolling instead of studying, snapping instead of listening, quitting instead of enduring. This is where conscious breathing becomes a powerful intervention. By deliberately slowing your breath and extending your exhale, you can activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest response. This has a direct calming effect on your body and mind. It slows your heart rate, reduces blood pressure, and quiets the internal noise that often drives impulsive behavior. In this calmer state, the prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for decision-making and long-term planning, becomes more active. You are no longer at the mercy of momentary urges or emotional storms. You gain space, and in that space you can choose. That space is where willpower lives. Research has shown that even just a few minutes of controlled breathing each day can enhance self-regulation, reduce anxiety, and improve focus. One particularly effective pattern is known as physiological sighing, a natural breathing pattern involving 2 quick inhales through the nose, followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth. This technique has been shown to quickly reduce levels of carbon dioxide in the bloodstream and lower physiological arousal. It's a kind of nervous system reset, and it's something you can do anytime, before a big meeting, when you're tempted to break a promise to yourself, or when you're about to make a tough decision. It's free, fast, and profoundly effective. Breath also plays a role in how we experience time. When we're stressed or overwhelmed, time feels compressed. Everything seems urgent. The next task, the next craving, the next notification all demand immediate attention. But slow, deliberate breathing expands your sense of time. It shifts you from reacting to observing, from impulsive to intentional. This expansion is critical because willpower is often about holding out, about resisting the easy thing now for the better thing later. When you breathe slowly, you quite literally buy yourself time. Time to remember your goal. Time to access your higher values. Time to stay with the difficult thing instead of running from it. Another fascinating aspect of breath is its influence on interoception, your brain's ability to sense the internal state of your body. The better you are at detecting subtle changes in your heartbeat, your breathing, and your internal temperature, the more accurately you can interpret your emotions and choose how to respond. Breathwork increases interoceptive awareness. You become more attuned to the signals your body is sending. You notice when stress is building, when you're losing focus, when a craving is rising. And with that awareness, you gain power. You can intervene before your habits take over. Over time, consistent breath training literally changes your brain. Functional MRI scans show that breath-focused practices increase connectivity between the prefrontal cortex and deeper emotional centers like the amygdala. This means your rational long-term thinking has more influence over your emotional reactivity. You become less likely to lash out, give in, or shut down when things get hard. Instead, you stay grounded, you stay capable, you stay committed to your higher path. And it doesn't take hours of meditation. Even 1 to 3 minutes of intentional breathing, repeated a few times a day, can reshape how your nervous system responds to stress and temptation. In the moments when you feel like quitting, when you're overwhelmed or emotionally triggered, the breath is a tool you can always return to. It centers you, it anchors you, and most importantly, it gives you access to your deeper self, the part of you that knows what truly matters. Breath is not just air, it's a a lever, a rhythm that tunes your entire system toward either chaos or clarity. And when you learn to control it, you no longer wait for willpower to show up. You create the conditions for it to emerge, calmly, consistently, powerfully. Every inhale becomes an opportunity to reset. Every exhale, a chance to let go of what doesn't serve. Over time, you begin to carry this calm with you, not just in quiet moments, but into the very heart of your challenges. That is the quiet mastery breath offers, and that is where true willpower begins. The brain is not designed to sustain focus indefinitely. Just like muscles, the neural circuits responsible for attention, decision-making, and impulse control fatigue with use. Trying to force yourself to power through for hours without rest is not a demonstration of strength, it's a recipe for burnout. What neuroscience teaches us is that one of the most effective ways to sustain willpower over time is to take deliberate breaks, but not just any kind of break. These need to be purposeful, timed correctly, and structured in a way that supports recovery of the very systems responsible for self-control and cognitive effort. When you're engaged in focused work or resisting temptation, you're relying heavily on your prefrontal cortex. This area of the brain uses a considerable amount of energy and is particularly sensitive to fatigue. Over time, neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine, which are critical for sustaining attention and motivation, begin to deplete. As these chemicals diminish, your ability to resist distraction, delay gratification, and persist in the face of difficulty declines. What once felt manageable now feels overwhelming. You begin to lose perspective, make impulsive decisions, and drift toward the path of least resistance. This isn't a personal failure, it's neurobiology, but it's also reversible. By incorporating deliberate breaks into your day, you give the prefrontal cortex a chance to recover. And not only that, you create a rhythm of effort and restoration that allows you to perform at a consistently high level over longer periods of time. This is the basis of ultradian rhythms, natural cycles of about 90 to 120 minutes that govern periods of alertness and fatigue throughout the day. When you work in alignment with these rhythms, engaging deeply for 90 minutes and then stepping away for 10 to 20 minutes, you optimize the brain's chemistry and energy regulation. You come back to the task with renewed clarity, stronger impulse control, and a greater sense of capacity. These breaks need to be truly restful, though. Scrolling social media, reading emails, or switching to another cognitively demanding task doesn't count. Those are not breaks. They are just shifts in stimulation. What the brain truly needs is a period of low-stimulus recovery. This could be a short walk without your phone, a few minutes of deep breathing or meditation, looking out a window at natural scenery, or even closing your eyes and doing nothing. Activities like these activate the brain's default mode network, which facilitates internal processing, emotional regulation, and memory consolidation. In essence, you allow your brain to integrate what you've been doing, clear out cognitive residue, and reset your capacity for focused work. Another powerful reason deliberate breaks support willpower is because they reduce decision fatigue. Every time you make a decision, no matter how small, it draws from a limited reservoir of mental energy. Over the course of a day, this reservoir gets depleted. By the afternoon or evening, even simple choices can feel taxing, and your ability to resist temptation weakens. When you take intentional breaks, especially between decision-heavy tasks, you prevent that fatigue from accumulating. You protect your cognitive resources and maintain the sharpness required to make consistent, values-aligned choices. Breaks also help regulate your emotional state. When you're constantly grinding without pause, your stress levels rise, your mood deteriorates, and your thinking becomes rigid and reactive. You become more likely to seek relief through distraction, procrastination, or indulgence. In contrast, when you pause intentionally, your nervous system rebalances, cortisol levels drop, heart rate variability improves, and you regain access to broader, more flexible thinking. This emotional reset is essential for willpower because so many of our failures in self-control stem from emotional overwhelm rather than lack of intent. What's even more powerful is that by taking breaks strategically, right before moments of high effort, you can actually preload your willpower system. It's like filling up a tank before a long drive. Athletes do this before competition, Performers do it before going on stage, and you can do it before entering a demanding task, a difficult conversation, or a moment of temptation. Just 5 to 10 minutes of intentional calm, sitting quietly, breathing deeply, or walking in nature can dramatically improve your ability to stay composed and focused when it matters most. There's also a psychological benefit to building rest into your day. It reinforces the belief that your energy matters, that your mental and emotional state are worth caring for. This reinforces a deeper sense of self-respect, which in turn supports willpower. Because when you see yourself as someone who deserves care and balance, you're more likely to act in ways that reflect that belief. You're less likely to burn yourself out for short-term gain, and more likely to sustain high performance over the long term. In the end, taking deliberate breaks is not laziness, it is not weakness, it is a form of mental conditioning. It is training your nervous system to cycle between effort and recovery, tension and release. It is recognizing that willpower is not infinite, but it is renewable, if you know how to restore it. And the people who master this rhythm, who learn to pause at the right times and return with purpose, are the ones who achieve the greatest consistency, resilience, and success. They are not simply pushing harder, they are working smarter, and that is the real path to enduring willpower. The people you surround yourself with can either be the wind at your back or the weight on your shoulders when it comes to building and maintaining willpower. Human beings are profoundly social creatures, and our brains are wired for imitation, emotional contagion, and alignment with group norms. Whether you're conscious of it or not, you absorb the behaviors, attitudes, and even the energy of those around you. If you're constantly in an environment where impulsiveness, procrastination, or short-term gratification are the norm, it becomes significantly harder to maintain discipline, focus, and commitment to long-term goals. But when you're surrounded by people who embody the qualities you're striving for, resilience, intention, accountability, those same qualities begin to emerge more naturally in you. The neurological foundation of this phenomenon lies in mirror neurons. These are specialized brain cells that activate both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing that action. This means that just watching someone exercise self-control, take consistent action toward a goal, or handle difficulty with calm and focus, literally primes your brain to do the same. This isn't theoretical, it's biological. Your nervous system is constantly learning from your environment, not just cognitively, but emotionally and behaviorally. That's why choosing your social circle with intention is not a matter of preference, it's a matter of performance. Consider how you behave when you're around someone who complains often, indulges in excuses, or makes impulsive decisions. Even if you don't agree with their mindset, it subtly influences yours. You may find your standards lowering without even realizing it. You may justify behavior you'd otherwise avoid. It's not because you've changed your values, it's because your brain is unconsciously adapting to the dominant energy around you. This is the principle of social gravity. You will tend to sink or rise to the level of the people you are closest to. On the other hand, when you regularly interact with people who hold themselves to high standards, who push themselves with discipline and grace, something inside you responds. You start thinking differently, you start questioning your own excuses, you feel inspired not by pressure, but by proximity. That inspiration is one of the most potent catalysts for willpower, because willpower is not just about resisting temptation, it's about staying connected to your higher self. And sometimes, the easiest way to remember who you want to be is to spend time with people who are already living that way. But it's not just about who you associate with, it's also about how you interact with them. One of the most powerful ways to build willpower is through accountability. When you declare your goals to someone you respect, and when they follow up with you, your brain processes those goals differently. They move from vague intentions to clear commitments. This activates regions of the brain involved in social judgment and self-monitoring, increasing your motivation to follow through. Not because you fear judgment, but because we all want to live in alignment with how others see us, especially those whose opinions matter to us. There's also a chemical aspect to this. Social connection increases levels of oxytocin, a hormone that promotes trust, bonding, and emotional regulation. Higher oxytocin levels reduce stress and support emotional resilience, both of which are crucial for maintaining willpower. When you feel connected, supported, and understood, your nervous system shifts from survival mode into growth mode. You become more capable of staying calm in the face of difficulty, of tolerating discomfort, and of delaying gratification, all core aspects of strong willpower. However, cultivating a willpower-supporting environment doesn't always mean cutting people off or avoiding those who are struggling. It's about being intentional with your exposure and setting boundaries that protect your energy. You can still love someone without allowing their chaos to infect your clarity, and you can still be kind without compromising your commitments. The key is to make sure that the people you spend the most time with, the ones who influence your thinking and habits on a daily basis, are helping you rise, not pulling you down. Sometimes that also means becoming the person who elevates others. When you embody willpower, you become a mirror for those around you. Your consistency inspires theirs, your calm becomes contagious, you shift the emotional tone of your environment, and that feedback loop strengthens your own habits. Because when you see your choices making an impact beyond yourself, it reinforces their importance. You're no longer just resisting distraction or temptation for your own sake, you're doing it as part of a larger ecosystem. That sense of purpose can be incredibly energizing. In the modern world, we often glorify independence and self-reliance, but the truth is willpower does not grow in isolation, it grows in community, in conversation, in shared struggle and mutual encouragement. The people you walk with determine how far you'll go and how strong you'll feel along the way. So if you want to build willpower that lasts, don't just look inward, look around. Choose relationships that remind you of your strength, that challenge you to be better, that reflect your highest self back to you. In the presence of such people, discipline stops feeling like a chore, it starts to feel like a natural extension of who you are becoming. And that's when willpower becomes not just something you use but something you embody. One of the most powerful and overlooked truths about willpower is that it is not a fixed trait, but something that can be trained just like a muscle. This metaphor is not just poetic, it is grounded in neuroscience and psychology. Willpower is governed by specific brain systems, particularly the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for decision-making, impulse control, and long-term planning. Just as a muscle strengthens through consistent, deliberate use, the neural pathways associated with self-control grow stronger through repeated practice. But this training must be approached with the same principles you would use to build physical strength: progressive overload, consistency, recovery, and patience. The mistake many people make is assuming that willpower is either something you have or something you don't. They believe it's an innate quality, a fixed quantity that gets depleted quickly and unpredictably. But science shows that the brain is plastic, it changes in response to how you use it. Every time you resist a craving, stay focused despite distraction, or make a decision aligned with your long-term goals despite discomfort, you are reinforcing those neural pathways. Over time, those pathways become more efficient, more automatic. What once required conscious effort becomes second nature. The more you exercise your willpower, the more willpower you have available to you. Training willpower doesn't have to involve heroic feats of self-denial. In fact, the most effective training begins with small, manageable challenges. For example, committing to getting out of bed at a consistent time each day, no matter how you feel, is a powerful way to strengthen self-regulation. It creates a moment of friction where you must override your immediate desire for comfort in favor of a larger goal. That small act may seem insignificant, but it sends a signal to your brain: I am in control. I can choose discomfort for the sake of growth, and each repetition of that signal wires the brain to trust your higher intentions over your short-term impulses. This approach can be extended to countless daily micro-decisions: delaying that impulse to check your phone, choosing water over a sugary drink, finishing one more set at the gym even when you feel like stopping, holding your tongue instead of reacting with emotion. Each moment is an opportunity to strengthen the circuits of discipline and self-command. These acts accumulate. What begins as effortful becomes automatic. You shift from relying on motivation, which is unreliable, to relying on identity, the belief that you are someone who does what is difficult when it matters. The process of training willpower also involves understanding your limits and strategically pushing them. Just like lifting too much weight too soon can cause injury, demanding too much self-control without breaks or support can lead to burnout. The goal is not to live in constant restraint, but to build the ability to direct your behavior in alignment with your goals. That means training smart, not just hard. You gradually increase the difficulty of your challenges while also building in rest, reflection, and reinforcement. That's how growth happens, not in a straight line, but in a cycle of effort and recovery, struggle and adaptation. There's also a powerful feedback loop between success and willpower. Every time you follow through on a commitment, no matter how small, you build self-trust. You accumulate evidence that you are capable of discipline, that you are someone who does what they say they'll do. That self-trust is like mental armor. It makes future challenges feel less daunting. You no longer approach them with fear or hesitation, you approach them with quiet confidence because you've trained for this. You've faced discomfort before and chosen growth. You know you can do it again. Moreover, training willpower changes not just how you act, but how you see yourself. You stop identifying as someone who struggles with discipline and start seeing yourself as someone who possesses inner strength. That identity shift is critical, because once your behavior is aligned with your self-image, the need for constant mental negotiation disappears. You don't have to argue with yourself every morning about whether to work out, study, or resist that urge. You simply do what someone with your values and identity would do. This is the ultimate goal of willpower training, not just control over behavior but transformation of character. It's also worth noting that setbacks are part of the process. No one builds strength without encountering failure. In fact, moments of failure are some of the most potent opportunities for growth. When you slip, when you break a promise to yourself, when you give in to temptation, how you respond matters more than the mistake itself. If you use those moments to learn, to reflect, or recommit, you're still training willpower. You're training resilience. You're training the ability to stay in the game even when things don't go perfectly. That's real strength, not perfection but persistence. Ultimately, willpower is not just about resisting the bad, it's about creating the good. It's about shaping a life built on intention rather than reaction. It's about developing the capacity to align your daily actions with your highest values over and over again, especially when it's hard. That's not a gift you're born with. It's a skill you build, and the more you train it, the more powerful it becomes. Like a muscle, it grows with use, and over time it becomes the foundation of everything else, your habits, your achievements, your sense of self. It is not always flashy, it is not always visible, but it is always working, quietly shaping the course of your life. When it comes to building and sustaining willpower, the role of a clear, compelling purpose cannot be overstated. Willpower is not an abstract concept. It is a tool, a resource that is most effectively utilized when you have something to direct it toward. Without purpose, willpower becomes a struggle against your own impulses, a battle that feels exhausting and often futile. But when your willpower is aligned with a clear and meaningful goal, it transforms from a chore into a powerful force that propels you forward. Having a strong sense of purpose provides not only the direction but also the motivation to continue when things get tough. The human brain is wired to seek meaning. When you connect your actions to a larger purpose, you tap into a deeper well of motivation. It's no longer just about what you're doing in the moment, it's about why you're doing it. Purpose creates a context for action, a narrative that ties each effort, no matter how small, to a larger story of growth, progress, and fulfillment. This is why people who are driven by purpose have an easier time with willpower. They're not relying solely on the fragile ebb and flow of motivation, they're tapped into something that is steady, internal, and deeply meaningful. When your willpower is tied to a purpose, the discomfort of effort becomes less intimidating. The sacrifice, the delay of gratification, the discipline all start to make sense because they are steps towards something that truly matters to you. If your purpose is to get in shape, every workout, every healthy choice is a small investment in a larger goal of health, vitality, and longevity. If your purpose is to become skilled in a new area, every moment of focused practice brings you closer to mastery, which brings its own rewards in terms of self-esteem, achievement, and the ability to contribute to the world. The pain of willpower becomes not something to avoid, but something to embrace as part of the process of fulfilling your deeper aspirations. One of the reasons purpose is so powerful is because it acts as an anchor. When you encounter obstacles, whether they're temptations, distractions, or fatigue, your purpose reminds you of why you're doing what you're doing. It cuts through the noise of the moment and helps you see the bigger picture. Without this anchor, it's easy to get lost in the ups and downs of daily life. You can easily forget why you're resisting temptation, why you're pushing through discomfort, why you're choosing long-term gain over short-term pleasure. But with purpose, those choices become easier because you can always remind yourself of what you're working toward. Purpose also has a profound effect on how you perceive challenges. When your actions are aligned with something deeply meaningful, setbacks and failures don't feel like personal deficiencies. They feel like part of the process, challenges to be overcome in the pursuit of something greater. You begin to see difficulties not as obstacles to your progress, but as valuable learning experiences, as opportunities to strengthen your resolve. Each difficulty becomes an integral part of the journey, not something to avoid, but something to learn from, something that refines and sharpens your character. The key difference here is that purpose changes your perception of hardship. Instead of feeling discouraged by setbacks, you view them as steps in the direction of success. Another aspect of purpose that enhances willpower is its ability to give you clarity. When you are clear about your purpose, your decisions become more straightforward. You don't have to waste mental energy on constant self-doubt or second-guessing. Each decision, each action is filtered through the lens of that purpose. When you know where you're going, the next step becomes obvious. For example, if your purpose is to improve your career, each action, whether it's networking, studying, or working on a project, becomes part of a larger roadmap. You don't need to decide whether to do it or not. The decision is already made for you by the clarity of your purpose. Moreover, when you have a strong sense of purpose, you tend to make better decisions in general. Willpower often falters in the face of immediate temptation or impulsivity. But purpose acts as a guiding light, illuminating your path and helping you resist short-term temptations that undermine long-term goals. For example, if you are focused on building your career, you're less likely to waste hours on meaningless distractions because you are keenly aware that those hours could be spent improving your skills, building your network, or working toward your ultimate goal. Purpose makes the decision for you because it makes clear what is truly important. It's also worth noting that purpose often comes with a sense of responsibility, not just to yourself but to others. Many people find that their willpower is greatly enhanced when they see their actions as contributing to something larger than themselves. This could be a family, a community, or a cause. When you realize that your efforts don't just benefit you but ripple out to impact others, it creates an additional layer of accountability. The thought of letting others down can be a powerful motivator, reinforcing your commitment to the hard work and discipline required to achieve your goals. And while having a clear purpose is essential, it is equally important that your purpose aligns with your core values and interests. Purpose that is driven by external expectations, whether from society, family, or peer pressure, tends to be less sustainable because it doesn't resonate deeply with who you are. On the other hand, when your purpose aligns with your intrinsic values, passions, and strengths, it feels effortless to work toward it. It becomes part of your identity, not something you have to force yourself to do. Your sense of purpose is something that pulls you forward, rather than something you have to push yourself to pursue. Purpose, then, is the ultimate source of willpower because it gives your actions meaning, direction, and motivation. It provides an emotional and psychological framework that makes difficult choices, sustained effort, and long-term sacrifice feel worth it. With purpose, you stop relying on the fleeting nature of motivation and instead tap into a deeper, more sustainable source of strength. Willpower becomes not just something you have to summon in moments of challenge, it becomes a natural extension of your commitment to living in alignment with your highest self. And when you align your actions with your purpose, every step you take is a step toward becoming the person you are meant to be.